Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. So glad you guys could join us. We have a special co-host with us today. I think you will remember her from our Shang-Chi episode as well as our Eternals episode. So she was our comic book guru back then and enthusiast. But today we have an entirely different topic. This topic is actually a different kind of origin story. We will be talking for a third time. We'll be talking with our friend Lauren. Hey, Lauren, what's up?
Hi.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you for having me back.
Do you want to help me introduce this topic? So we were online and we were messaging and you said, hey, I've got an idea for a show. And you said?
I said, what about something that has to do with postpartum traditions, Asian traditions, but maybe like fertility, conception, talking about the mamas and the...
And I was all for that because I am a total expert on this subject. No, I am not. I'm not at all. I was like, well, Lauren, that sounds great, but I don't know that much. I mean, I remember the pig's feet and the vinegar, but that's about all I remember so I had that seed in my head. I was like, okay, so someday we should talk about this subject, but I was like waiting for an expert to fall into my lap, and guess what happened? I was watching Instagram and this reel came up and it was Jennifer and Irene talking about Chiyo, and so experts fell into our lap. So I decided to reach out to them and they said they'd come on, and they run a company called Chiyo. Well, I'll let them introduce it, but it's all about postpartum and Asian traditions and nutrition and wellness for baby and wellness for mama. And so we're excited to have them on today. Actually, well, first, Lauren, is there any reason why this topic came to your mind?
Oh, well, it was because I was early in my pregnancy at that time and I was thinking about it.
Woohoo! So Lauren's pregnant, and so we decided to get her on this episode one last time, probably for a while.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Goodbye, world.
Well, no, it's not that you're going away or anything, but I don't know if you're going to be coming on the podcast anytime soon. But we'll see. We'll see.
This is true.
Who knows?
Yes.
Maybe you'll have a lot of free time on your hands. Who knows? All right. So that was a few months back, but we are excited to have with us some folks from We Are Chiyo, and it is an Asian postpartum nutrition. How would you describe it, Irene or Jennifer? How would you describe your company in one sentence here?
Yeah, we call it Eastern Food Therapy Meets Nutritional Science for mind, body, and motherhood. But what we do is basically stage-specific nutrition programs for women's health. So starting in postpartum, eventually we'll expand from there.
Amazing. And so we're excited to have the co-founders of Chiyo. It is Jennifer Jolorte and Irene Liu. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Where are you guys calling in from today?
I am in New York. I live upstate now.
Mm-hmm.
I think Irene's in her childhood bedroom, though.
I am. Yes, I am in my childhood bedroom in LA because we have some meetings and events for Chiyo. But there's also a crib in here now for my nephew because my parents' house has become my nephew's house.
Okay.
Essentially on the weekends.
Okay. Yeah. So you got toys everywhere. You got lots of stuff going on. Awesome. All right. So we did a real quick intro, but maybe a little longer intro, Jennifer, on Chiyo. What does Chiyo do, and what can it do for Lauren, and what can it do for other moms out there?
Yeah, so we started out with our postpartum meal program, and essentially it's a 6-week program adhering to the first 40 days. So if that's something that you're familiar with, but essentially it's postpartum tradition where people are cared for at least a little over a month, traditionally very much focusing on rest, eating very specific foods, having people take care of you. And I think we can go into like maybe specifics of the program, but essentially we offer a meal program that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, snacks, broths, and tonics, up to 6 weeks postpartum.
All right. And so it started in New York, but now you're nationwide. Yeah, you'll deliver pretty much anywhere in the States?
Yeah, so we started very, very locally. I mean, just very much in the inception, like we were like, oh, we're only going to deliver to Manhattan. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And this was like very much kind of like pandemic, prime time pandemic. And the thought of nationwide shipping like wasn't even on our mind.
Yeah. All right. So while you guys are listening to this episode, you can go ahead and click over at wearechiyo.com and find out more about it. But before we get into all the specifics of the company, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourselves? We like to dig into our guests' heritage stories. And so could you tell us like maybe where your family's from, what heritage you identify with, and maybe where you grew up?
Yeah, I can start. So I'm Filipino and Chinese. I grew up in San Diego. I have a huge family, basically spanning like San Diego and LA. For example, my mom has 3 brothers, 3 sisters. So she comes from a family of 7. And then I have a whole slew of second cousins in LA. I can't even count how many family members I have. I swear, probably at a minimum, like 50 cousins, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I spent a lot of summers with my family in LA, very much exposed to kind of like very traditional Filipino kind of upbringing. So very much a lot of food, always food, and traditions like mahjong or like lechon, obviously for like celebrations and funerals too. And then obviously lots of superstitions like, oh, you need to nap because you'll grow taller. And like, I napped so much, but I'm still like 5'1.25", right?
And then I saw on Instagram that maybe we're celebrating a 1-year mark just recently.
Yeah. So my youngest just turned 1.
All right. Congratulations. Yeah.
He made it. You made it. Go, mama.
Yeah, exactly.
When it's a 1-year party, I always say it's more for the parents just to say that we made it through the year.
Yeah. So I am a mother of 2. I have a 4-year-old and I guess a toddler now.
Yeah.
No longer a newborn or a baby.
Yeah,
I don't really know what he's called now, but
yeah.
They'll always be our little babies.
I know. I call my kids babies still. Irene, how about you? What's your background and what heritage do you identify with?
Yeah, so I'm Taiwanese American. Grew up in LA. I literally live a 5-minute or less drive from my grandparents, so very much close with my family. A lot of my aunts and uncles around. Very much kind of rooted in, the Eastern way of thinking and food as medicine, definitely, and the importance of nutrition. And I remember, like, for my mom, like, when I got my first period, I went to the acupuncturist and she got me these like concoctions that I was like, what is this? It tastes terrible. And why are we drinking this? And so when I was younger, it was very much like, what's the nutritional science behind this? Like, why do we eat these things? And then what happened and kind of some context, Jennifer grew up with a lot of kids. I actually did not. For the longest time, my sister and me were the only grandchildren on my mom's side of the family, and that's kind of the tribe that we have in LA. So actually it came out of left field when my aunt had a baby the summer of 2020, and that's when I saw my mom taking care of her in this way using traditional Chinese medicine. And I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. Like, why do they eat these things? What's the nutritional content? What are all the traditions? How do other countries care for women that the US doesn't do? And my background before doing Chiyo, I don't have kids. I'm literally just building the cells like it needs to exist, and I need this down the line. But my background was more in food access and nutrition education. And so I worked in private sector and public sector and nonprofits, and actually spent the last 3 years in tandem running Chiyo, doing a policy and business graduate degree. And yeah, and so that was when I was like all of this converging to be like, okay, there's a problem in women's health. I know that there's something better from what I've seen in other countries and what my family has brought over in the US, but like, how do you make this more of the standard of care in the US?
Yeah. So how did you two meet? Did you know each other before Chiyo at all, or how did this happen?
Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, I feel like we always have like a very formal way of saying this, but essentially Irene reached out to me in Instagram.
Okay.
And so like sent me a DM and was like, hey, I have this idea. Like, would you be open to talking? And essentially like gave her my email. We emailed, we met. And she basically was like, hey, I have this idea. It's kind of something what you're doing already, but like, how can we make it like bigger?
Mm. So it was just a coincidence that you saw Jennifer's post about nutrition or postpartum nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it literally was like, I was like manic the day that I was like, oh, this is something like, why doesn't it exist? I was like scouring the internet, doing research on other countries, seeing like, is anybody doing it? Because I was like, I don't need to do this. If it exists, like, great, love it.
Right.
But I just couldn't find anybody doing it the way and at scale to really be the standard of care for a lot of people. And so kind of along the way, then I saw Jennifer, and then I was like reading about kind of how she approaches it, and felt like it was really aligned in being both holistic, but also very rooted, like evidence-backed and nutritional science. And I think that was a really important component of modernizing and bringing validity to a lot of these traditions. And so I cold emailed her, and then kind of we took it from there. But it's funny because over time we found out that we do have like some mutual friends in New York. I think it was like Jennifer's friend who was my high school friend's roommate or something. So they had met at some point. Jennifer's like trying to remember who that was, but
I know.
So Irene, you have more of the business background and more of the, like, you went to B school and you studied more policy stuff. What were you thinking when you were in grad school? Were you thinking you would start a business for yourself someday or?
Oh my gosh, no, not at all. I was actually still sponsored from my consulting firm going into school. And I literally didn't think that far. I just thought like, oh, this should exist. Like, how do we make this happen? And then I feel like the market kind of spoke for itself and how we started. I don't know how much you know about this, but like, we started because Google search, like we became the first organic Google search result before we were ready. Like we had no investment, no team. I was still in graduate school for another year and a half. Jennifer was pregnant. Like it was just chaos. But we got thousands of dollars of pre-orders that December from people who just found us. So then we were like, we weren't thinking, we were just like, oh, we need to ship the product. Like they're newly postpartum moms. Like we can't ship it to them later. Like it needs to happen. So we literally just cobbled it together that January of 2021 in kind of a day off free kitchen restaurant that we found from other connections, some chefs that were unemployed from COVID. So we literally cobbled it together. And then it kind of kept going without us being ready for it. Like we got our feature in New York Times, a feature in Bon Appetit, all within the first quarter, which really showed like the cultural momentum behind it. And I remember actually talking to my mom about it, and I was like, oh my God, like I still have a year of school. Like I wasn't prepared for this. Like I thought I'd like, have some time to conceptualize it, like, make sure we could do it properly before we launched. And I remember my mom saying like, sometimes the ball is rolling and you just have to get on board. So it's been a very wild ride.
That's fantastic. You're like building the airplane as it's flying. And I think it just shows, like you said before, how much of a need there is. People are Googling this. And I think, new moms or moms, once again, like myself, knowing that we need that support. I think it's so fantastic that you just went for it. So brave to cold DM someone you didn't even know.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I feel like when you think about it now, it feels like, were we just like so wildly naive and determined? Because when we think about like obviously where we are today to where we started, and truly it was Irene and I for so long, like truly just us. Like it seems like such a wild ride to even where we are today. I don't even know how we started. It seems like that was all,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that part was like a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just such a miraculous coming together of all these different events and timings. I mean, for you, Irene, this is like your baby.
I know.
Your
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
I can't handle having a baby right now. I need to
Because
get
you've got this baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, this business baby.
Get this
for
baby
sure.
to school. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you mentioned there's this sometimes this gap between the like evidence-based nutritional science and how that translates to traditional Chinese medicine or even Ayurvedic. There is definitely a connection. And I think in some postpartum delivery services, like in the San Francisco Bay Area, for example, some of them are just in Chinese, the menus are in Chinese, or you got to hear about it through WeChat or something.
Right.
You have folks, I've done that. I've bought soups from, my son's daycare provider. She would do like soups on the side and be like, yes, I will pay you on the side for these traditional Chinese medicine soups. But then there's this gap between like, I don't speak Chinese very fluently. And these traditions help not just Chinese people or Asian people. It's like everyone in postpartum from all backgrounds need that support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of richness to the traditions that when you don't like kind of bridge the gap in educating on like why you eat certain things, it loses its power, at least in the Western world. And so I think that's been really important for us to like make sure we're rooted in the traditions, but also bring the validity and evidence backing so that it can be more of the standard of care and eventually, big dream, paid for with reimbursement available with your employers and with insurance coverage.
Yeah. So Jennifer, you brought to the table the nutrition background. What did you see out there when you were pregnant and when you had your first child? What did you see out there? Did your parents or mother-in-law, or how did you address postpartum nutrition when you had your first kid?
I mean, I think for me, it really started in kind of, very much in this space of like maternal care. I kind of started where like Irene is now. Like I didn't have children. I just was like fascinated by what maternal nutrition could look like and should look like. And really, I started out kind of in kind of like the pre and postnatal yoga space, and then thinking, well, if there is no nutritionist or authority to kind of bridge the gap between what people should be doing, thinking about people culturally or access wise, there has to be a person or something that does that already. And it didn't really seem like there was. It was so strange to me. Like, why would you recommend, someone to eat liver if they've never had liver before, for example? I love liver, but, I don't think that's like the first thing people think about. And so I very much sought out to be that type of provider or, create that type of practice. And so as time went on, basically creating kind of this like private postpartum chef practice that I had. And that's how Irene and I connected. I think it was very much trying to get a sense of like what people were looking for, obviously like, baseline time savers, wanting to feel supported, but then also thinking about the nutrition portion of like, what are the exact nutrients that they need? What are the exact, maybe like food cultures that they gravitate towards? So I know a lot of people really think about maybe their favorite comfort foods, and maybe culturally, those are all different for different people. And then thinking about now today, obviously with Chiyo, it's how we say like we bridge the gap between like Eastern food therapy and nutritional science. And so very much taking the traditional foods. So maybe like you had said, like the pork feet, or maybe like a sesame chicken or like a black silken chicken, like all of these foods that are very traditional, but then how do you modernize them or make them more nutrient dense and for kind of the modern consumer?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share my experience a little bit too, and Lauren, you can share yours. So we had our children, and my mother-in-law is from Hong Kong, and so she brought over the clay pot with the pig's feet and the black vinegar and a lot of ginger, and also let's see, what was it? Some chicken, kind of simply boiled chicken with peanuts, I think was it, in there. And I didn't actually eat a lot of it, but I saw it, and I always wondered, is there a book somewhere, or how does she know? And I think it's just passed down. I think you just kind of ask around and you pass it down. But I always wondered, what do you do if you're, let's say you're a mixed race couple or something, and you don't have a mother-in-law to do it for you, or your mother-in-law doesn't remember. Like my parents were born here, so they didn't know necessarily how to make it. They've heard of this stuff, but they've never did know how to make it. Lauren, what was your experience like having a kid?
Yeah, when I was pregnant with my first, around that time is when that book called The First 40 Days was released by Hung Oh. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name or her name correctly, but I think that when I saw that, I was like, ooh, this is like my cultural traditions and this beautifully illustrated and lovely written book. And I put it on my baby shower registry, and my lovely coworker Dina Dobraka at the time, she said, Lauren, I'm getting this for you. You are so forward thinking about your postpartum journey. And I was like, oh, Dina, you are such a blessing. And when my mom saw that I got it, she's like, give me that book, Lauren. That's not for you to read. That's for me to read really for you. I was like, oh, Mom, cool. So she made a lot of recipes from that book, because I think, just like Curtis was saying, I don't think she had a cookbook from her traditions, but she knew of them. And it was just nice to have that kind of in one spot. So we did a lot of like jujube tea, like every day to the hospital. She would bring it to me after my son was born. And a lot of like the papaya and peanut and fish soup and the chicken. And so yeah, I was really, really blessed. But I knew that it was a lot on my mom too, to like prepare all those foods for me, but also to come and like physically be there and help me take care of my son and just support our whole family. So I think that even because we're not in a society where we have like many generations of women supporting the pregnant or the postpartum person and the baby. Sometimes it's just a smaller community. So having like a postpartum service like yours, it fills in that gap for people who know they need that support, but may not be able to get it from their immediate family. My mom's getting older. That was like 5 years ago.
Yeah. Is that a story that you guys hear all the time, that people want to do these traditional things, but they just don't have access to it?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. We have some of our customers that have heard, or Asian in heritage, have heard about it, or like live far away from family, and so that's why they are definitely very bought in on having something for the first 40 days. And then we also have some who start doing research about like postpartum recovery, might hear about us from their doula or their acupuncturist, but they didn't grow up with this culturally. But once they hear about it, they're like, I need this. And so that's why they find us as well. But I think also the last point is like we get a lot of gifting, and we think it's super sweet. Like we have some parents that buy it for their kids when they're having expanding their family. I remember one in particular, the grandmother, I guess, she, like, it was COVID, like she couldn't get across the border because she was in Canada, and so she bought like a full 6 weeks for her daughter, and so it was like life-saving, and just like made her feel. And we heard this from like a sister bought it for her sister because she was in Boston and her sister was in New York, and it just made them also feel comforted and relieved that like their loved one was getting the care that they needed.
Yeah. And I feel like too, like you know, taking the book and then putting it into practice is like a whole other feat
Right.
too. So it's like, yes, the ideas, or, you know, if someone gives you recipes, sure, this is like great, but like, how do you do that? Like, I know people who have like been gifted the book or, you know, other things like that. And it's like, okay, so like, do we just buy everything in here? Like, how do we even attempt to do this?
Yeah, my mom, my sister just had a baby last July, and my mom was basically trying to learn all of these. Like people had done it for her, but it was her first time doing it for somebody else, like very, very fully. She did it in some parts with my aunt, 2 years earlier. But even for her, she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so stressed, like trying to buy all the ingredients and
That's a
figure out
lot.
how to cook it." Yeah, and she was like, "This is a full-time job." Like, and also I think understanding kind of the evolution of women too, like a lot more are in the workforce for longer. And so, you know, my mom isn't retired yet, and so she has a full-time job. So adding this on top of her plate was like a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the science behind it? I always think it's fascinating that these ancient traditions a lot of times jive with current science, and so like when you're cooking the pig's feet, or you're cooking the chicken, or you're cooking the traditional dishes, there's probably some things that tie into current nutrition. So Jennifer, can you touch on that a little bit? Like how do these things actually help a woman after she's given birth?
Yeah. So I think, for an example, like ginger is like a really good example of, yes, this is an ingredient that is used very traditionally, you know, in traditional Chinese medicine, in teas, and then in soups or in stews, maybe with congis, things like that. So even if you think of, okay, maybe postpartum, a very traditional dish is like congee, and like it's typically cooked in chicken broth with ginger. All of these things are really good for digestion. Ginger specifically is great for digestion, any kind of upset stomach. So it's very much like targeted, like you kind of subconsciously maybe growing up that way. You're like, oh, I'm just going to throw some ginger in here, but then not even really realizing like, oh, this is actually an ingredient that totally is used for this specific purpose.
Right.
I think another one, I guess Lauren mentioned, is like jujubes. So like jujubes have some magnesium. Magnesium is typically used for like muscle relaxation, you know, can aid in any cramping, kind of like postpartum, like muscle weakness, things like that. So it's like, again, you don't even really, you're like, oh, like I like jujubes, or I'm, you know, there's a jujube tea mix that like subconsciously, like I've just had my whole life, but you don't even really then think like, oh, well, the nutrition behind it, this actually makes more sense.
Yeah, or even some of the traditional recipes like seaweed soup in Korean culture, and the iodine that comes from seaweed, or bone broth, and all of the minerals and nutrients that are in that. Or even like in Taiwanese culture, like sesame chicken is a very common postpartum food. And sesame oil is really good for anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, improving, you know, vitamin E for like skin and hair, and obviously chicken for protein. And so it's like, this is like what our whole approach is like. There's so much richness in these traditions. We just don't explain it in a way that, you know, Western culture values oftentimes.
Right.
And even if you think about, like, I know you talked about the pig's feet earlier, like collagen, right? Like what we're using is collagen powders, but like we've kind of divorced that from what's the actual source.
Yeah.
I think too, like just the idea, and like very much in traditional Chinese medicine, using like warming foods that are just already easy to digest, and very much it says to avoid any raw foods or cold foods. And this is even when maybe you're trying to conceive in your pregnancy and also postpartum. And I think I met someone the other day and we were kind of all talking about, oh, you know, why would you really want warm food in the summer? And they were like, yes, like even though you've had a baby, like, you know, it doesn't, just because it's hot doesn't mean like your internal temperature is necessarily the same. And even thinking about it in that sense, very much like you have a baby and your temperature, just due to your hormone fluctuations, are changing. And like you don't even really you put two and two together. And which is why, like with traditional Chinese medicine, it's like, no, you want to bring the warmth back. Like you've lost some, you want to like dispel old blood, and you want to bring the warmth back to you.
I was scrolling through your Instagram. What's your handle? We are Chiyo. Fantastic. But I love how you and your team make those connections between the traditions and the current science and the when and the why, because, you know, bringing it back to the yeet hay thing that Curtis said, you're little, you're like, okay, Mom, Pawpaw, you guys are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like there's not hot air in me or cold air in me or whatever, all of those things. But it's really true, you know, and when you dig into the science behind it, so there's this like just connecting the dots. It really, really helps just conceptualize, and then for folks to internalize, okay, there is a rhyme and a reason that my ancestors have passed this down, and that I do feel good when I drink chrysanthemum tea after eating a bag of hot Cheetos or whatever the case may be.
So what are some of the things that Chiyo can do for people out there? I looked around the website a little bit, and everyone out there should do the same and take a look at some of the things you offer. But why don't you tell everyone out there what you guys can get if you click on wearechiyo.com?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about our hero program because that's kind of the core of what we do. But our postpartum nutrition program is a 6-week program, first 40 days, as Jennifer said. And what you get is basically a foundation of really good meals, so like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and then personalized herbal broths and tonics. So those follow basically what week of your recovery you're in, and it's formulated with our Eastern medicine advisor. They're tonics, so you drink in the morning, and then broths. It's like beef bone broth cubes that are infused with the Eastern medicine herbs. Drop it in hot water and also drink in the afternoon. And then kind of the last part of what we're building and what is upcoming, which we're really excited about, is actually a digital platform that helps guide the whole experience and really make it feel programmatic, so that you get content and coaching week by week. And so you actually feel like you're like onboarding and graduating from the program.
And these are fully prepared meals?
Yes.
So they come frozen, or they come...
Yeah. So for we operate out of New Jersey, and so for local delivery, it's fresh, and then for nationwide shipping, it's frozen, just for food safety reasons.
Yeah.
And then we also have our hormonal health and fertility nutrition program that's coming out later in May, and that is basically focused on anyone, you know, getting off the pill, starting to rebalance their hormones, or going through like IUI or IVF, or egg freezing, and helping them kind of experiential learning around nutrition and prioritizing like egg health.
Yeah, and I saw that these are there's also, you can buy just the a la carte broth and tonic package, or even just get a pantry package. So there's different levels. Yeah. And like you said, I would think this would be a great gift for someone, you know, because a lot of times people say, oh, you know, let me know if there's anything I can do. You know, and sometimes you don't have an idea, you know, like, what are you going to do? Change diapers or, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, this is something that you can just really practically do for someone. And, you know, you don't have to live nearby, and, you know, maybe you live far away. So this is great. This is great. What are you hearing from people?
Well, in terms of like the gifting, I think we had talked about, but I think people, again, you know, if you're someone who maybe you're not thinking about having children, and you really don't even know what to get your friend, and you kind of think of like, oh, maybe I'll get them like a nice onesie or a nice blanket, and it's like you don't even realize that like someone's getting gifted. I mean, at my baby shower, I got gifted probably 30 swaddles.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is a lot of stuff.
It's great, but
yeah, like, and I think especially what we want to reemphasize is, you know, what about the like the person having the baby. Like, how do you, how are you able to care for your family and as your family is growing if like you yourself are not cared for? So
Yeah.
obviously with our program, it really very much focuses on that person and making sure that like they're whole, they're healthy, they're supported so that they can, be the caretaker for everybody else typically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could see where the delivery would be great, because when we were first new parents and, the knock on the door and it's, a relative with a pot of chicken or a pot of something. And of course they want to come in and talk for an hour, and you're just exhausted and especially now in the days of COVID, you don't really want hundreds of people coming to your house and stuff. So I could definitely see where the delivery would be fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's great that you put the guesswork out of all of the sourcing, for example, of the dried goods and the herbs, because that always is a quandary for me. If you going into, a TCM store or just like any Chinese store that has all these dried goods, and it's like, how long have these been here?
Yeah.
Do I need to be concerned about pesticides or, contamination by heavy metals and things like that? But I think having your company kind of source and do all of that is really, really helpful.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think we talked about this a little bit, and we're gonna Jennifer and Irene are gonna offer Infatuasian listeners a little discount. It's gonna be $30 off nutritional programs with a minimum purchase of $150, and this is for new customers out there. So if you haven't already subscribed or purchased from Chiyo, you can use this code. Enter AsianPod30 when you check out, and you'll save $30 off of your first purchase. So I don't know, Lauren, maybe you should check your mail.
I know. At first, I didn't know that Chiyo was nationwide. I wasn't sure, but that's so fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I was literally just the other day looking at some in the Bay Area, but they are like geared towards people who can speak and read Chinese, which I'm sure that they're great. But for me, I was like, I do not know how to order this. I've got to download a PDF and then fax it to them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, this is cool. This is a side topic. This is not your area of expertise, but do either of you know why, or all three of you, do you know why you're not supposed to take a shower for like 30 days? Does anybody know anything about that one?
I mean, I think truly it's the temperature thing.
Okay. Maybe.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like the same reason why, when there's transitions from, I think at least for me, but I know a lot of people, the transition from like winter to spring can be really tough as it's colder. So they say like cover your throat or cover your head. You don't want to lose like the body temperature, or even very much thinking about like, again, having the baby and then making sure that your like uterus and your lower abdomen is warm. So that's why you have like the ginger tea and just like warm foods, warm tonics. But I don't think people realize that warming foods are good for you to have, on a weekly basis. And I think, you guys are in California, so you don't really have like seasons as we do here in New York now. But growing up as a California girl, I can definitely appreciate, warm food and the true seasonal transitions out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom, she's a nurse, and she was like a neonatal nurse when, back in the day. But we talked about this too, the no showering and all of that. And she said the same thing as Jennifer. It's really about the temperature, like making sure that the body's warm, because back in the day, like in China and the villages, there's no central heating.
Right.
If you take a shower, your hair is going to be wet for a while. Yeah. And there was a much higher risk of infection just in traditional times compared to now. So it was more like protecting the body from risks of infection or just weakness of the immune system in general.
Yeah.
So these days, if you shower, just like blow dry your hair, ladies, men, before bed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was thinking it goes back to the days when you're bathing in the river. You don't really want, you might have open wounds down there and stuff, and you don't really want to be in the river at that moment.
Yeah, you don't have like heating pads or, heat blankets or
sitz baths.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're going to I'm going to skip the lightning round because honestly, I couldn't think of any good lightning round questions. But we like to end each episode by asking our guests to pick an infatuasian. An infatuasian is anyone in the Asian community that you admire or has inspired you, living or deceased. It does not have to be related to what you're doing right now. But let's start with maybe Jennifer. Jennifer, who is your infatuasian?
Yeah, so I would say mine is Vanessa Du of Health Aid. I love her. She's actually one of our investors and has become such a great mentor, friend, and just paving the way, I guess, too, for Asians in the startup community and really building an amazing brand and empire.
Very cool. How about you, Irene? You have an infatuasian?
Yeah, mine is Reshma Saujani. She is actually the founder of Girls Who Code and also started Marshall Plan for Moms or Moms First. I'm a bit biased because she went to the same policy school as me, but I think what I really love about her is really questioning the status quo and trailblazing and demanding for better.
Yeah. No, I love it when we talk to entrepreneurs. They always have good stories. Someday, you might be the inspiration for someone else starting another company or starting from scratch. So hats off to you too as well. Today, you are our infatuasians. So thank you so much for coming on.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Oh, our pleasure. And Lauren, you have any more questions that you had to ask?
Oh my gosh. I actually do have a lot of questions. I know we're wrapping up, but I just want to say I think that it's amazing how Chiyo started from a simple idea that is rooted in just a foundational value that I think in the US at least has really diminished over time, and that's just a core of lifting up families and having that kind of address social injustice as a whole. And we didn't speak about that specifically, but Irene, when you were sharing about, why, I felt that, and I think that supporting moms and babies and families is just foundational for a country that can really thrive and be agile and be powerful together. Yeah. So it's cool. You started so small and now you're nationwide. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot more in store.
All right. Stay tuned, everyone. So everyone out there, if you or anyone you know is thinking about having a baby, pregnant, or just giving birth, please do them and yourself a favor, but go over to wearechiyo.com, find out more about the company and what they provide and their vision and their purpose. I think it might be the perfect gift. I mean, it's 1,000 times better than bringing over an old lasagna. Come on, people. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. So best of luck to Irene and Jennifer. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll stay tuned to see what else you guys are providing.
Thank you.
Yay.
Sure. And thank you, Lauren. I'm glad we had one more chance to get you on the podcast before baby number 2. I'll tell you from experience, that second kid, man, it ups the level. It ups the level a little bit. So we may not see you for a little while.
I know. I need the postpartum meals. I'll need a 12-week. I'll put in my order now.
Put in the 12 weeks.
a double. Yeah.
Maybe someone will gift you a nanny. Is that put that on your list?
Yeah.
No, it's fun. It's good times. Once you see the first time you see them play together, it's pretty special. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Can't wait. Thank you. This was a purely selfish podcast suggestion.
Yeah, she just wanted
and
information.
I'm glad to see it come to fruition.
All right.
Oh, that's so fun.
All right.
Are you guys both based in the Bay Area?
Yeah, we're a couple minutes from each other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we've known
In South Bay or
No, we're
East Bay?
well, I'm in Daly City, right on the border of San
Okay.
Francisco,
Yeah.
and we won't give away Lauren's location, but it's pretty close.
Yes, right in the
I can
peninsula, I'm right there.
almost see you.
Got
Lauren.
it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So as I always mention, you can write to us at infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow us at Instagram and Facebook at The Infatuasian Podcast. And you never know who's going to DM you. Like maybe Irene will DM you one of these days with an idea for a company. So always check your DMs, guys. And so I'll put all this information in the show notes, and you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, but you know all that already. So, on behalf of Jennifer, Irene, Lauren, and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.